Forget everything you thought you knew about dusty, ancient Greek plays. Today, we're tearing down that whole facade and looking at Sophocles' Oedipus Rex for what it truly is, a flawlessly engineered, high-stakes psychological thriller. I mean, this play is literally the historical prototype for the modern forensic investigation. We're talking about a story where a brilliant mind hunts down a dangerous criminal, only to realize the trail of clues leads directly back to himself.
So here's the roadmap for our explainer today. First, we'll hit the Athenian context. Second, the flawless dramatic architecture. Third, the unyielding forensic audit. Fourth, the paradox of vision. And finally, number 5, determinism and modern legacy. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Athenian context. A society on the brink.
To really get inside the heads of the original audience, we have to walk through this timeline. Think about it. Athens was in the age of Pericles. They were hitting the absolute zenith of their direct democratic model. Citizens were literally out in the public square debating state laws. And theater? It wasn't just weekend commercial entertainment for them. It was a massive, state-funded civic festival where the entire city-state engaged in collective political education. But despite all this incredible architectural and cultural splendor, they hit a massive wall. The Peloponnesian War against Sparta created immense social friction, which was then compounded by a devastating biological plague that just swept right through Athens. This epidemic triggered a huge, systemic crisis of faith in both human laws and divine governance. And it's this exact, dark, plague-ridden atmosphere that directly mirrors the opening sequence of our story.
Moving on to Section 2. Flawless dramatic architecture. Aristotle's perfect paradigm.
Now, centuries later, the great philosopher Aristotle actually analyzed this play in his work, Poetics, and he isolated Oedipus Rex, officially labeling it the single most perfect tragedy ever constructed. Why? Because of its impeccable causal structure. The story is built flawlessly, almost like a perfect algorithm. Every single localized scene acts as an inescapable trigger, a line of code that inevitably forces the next one to execute. There's no filler here, no wasted motion at all. Every action just locks the protagonist tighter and tighter into his own fate.
And the ultimate output of that rigid structure is a concept Aristotle defined as catharsis. This was the intended end-user experience, basically, the psychological purification of fear and pity within the civic audience. By watching this brilliantly capable leader systematically dismantle his own life through his own investigation, the Athenian citizens underwent a profound moral audit. It was quite literally designed to humble them, to cleanse them of their own arrogance when facing unpredictable cosmic forces.
Which brings us to Section 3, the unyielding forensic audit. Tracking the systemic plague.
So our inciting incident is a literal crisis of state. The city-state of Thebes is suffering from a catastrophic biological plague. And King Oedipus? Well, he's a beloved, highly capable problem solver. After all, he's the metrics-driven executive who previously secured his throne by decoding the impossible riddle of the Sphinx. So he promises his citizens an unrelenting, merciless forensic inquiry to find the source of the disaster. The Oracle of Delphi gives them the parameters. The plague is only going to stop when the assassin of the former king, Laius, is identified and exiled.
Oedipus executes this investigation with absolute, terrifying rigor, going step by step. First, he gets the oracle's revelation about the killer. Next, he summons the blind seer Tiresias for answers, which, spoiler alert, goes poorly. Then, he conducts a strategic debrief with his wife, Queen Jocasta, yielding a highly disturbing clue. And finally, he tracks down the lone surviving witness, an ancient shepherd, to extract the final piece of the puzzle. It is an inescapable causal loop. Oedipus pushes the investigation forward at every single stage, even when the people around him are literally begging him to stop.
Let's look closer at that meeting with Tiresias. When Oedipus aggressively interrogates the blind seer, Tiresias initially refuses to speak at all. But after being provoked, he delivers this incredibly stark, unadorned diagnostic. You are the killer you seek. I mean, talk about the ultimate bad day at work, right? The brilliant lead detective realizes the prime suspect is staring right back at him in the mirror. Yet Oedipus totally dismisses this terrifying absolute fact. He writes it off as nothing more than a political conspiracy orchestrated by his rivals. His brilliant mind just rationalizes away the truth simply because it doesn't fit his internal model of reality.
But the cracks in that reality start to form during a conversation with his queen, Jocasta. She's actually trying to comfort him by proving that prophets are often wrong.
Her proof? She mentions that her former husband, Laius, was killed by highwaymen at a triple crossroad, which completely invalidated an old prophecy that Laius would be killed by his own biological son. But instead of comfort, this triggers a massive cognitive freeze in Oedipus. The puzzle pieces begin snapping together with horrifying speed. He remembers fleeing his own home city because an oracle told him he would murder his father and wed his mother. And suddenly, he remembers that along his journey to Thebes, he engaged in a violent right-of-way dispute with an arrogant traveler right at a triple crossroad.
So, the crucial point is reached. Oedipus demands the final witness, the shepherd, be brought in, and when the messenger and the shepherd cross-reference their timelines, we hit total system collapse. The absolute data is exposed. Oedipus was the infant son of Laius and Jocasta. He was abandoned in the wilderness to circumvent that very prophecy, but he was covertly rescued and adopted by another royal house. The horrifying truth drops like an anvil. The prophecy was executed with perfect causal efficiency. By maneuvering so aggressively to avoid his fate, he steered himself directly into it. He unknowingly murdered his father at that crossroad and married his own mother. The fallout is instant and absolute. Jocasta commits suicide, and Oedipus's glorious reign ends in total ruin.
Let's unpack the core themes in Section 4. The paradox of vision, the illusion of control.
The primary force at play here is hubris. Now, it's absolutely vital to understand that Oedipus falls from power and grace not because of malicious intent. He's actually characterized as a deeply just interviewed leader. His fatal flaw is his intellectual arrogance, the sheer overconfidence of believing that human analytical intellect can outmaneuver systemic cosmic algorithms, or what the Greeks called destiny. The harder he tried to intelligently hedge against the prophecy, the tighter it gripped him.
And this brilliantly illustrates the central motif of the play, the paradox of vision. Sophocles builds this stunning visual irony. On one side, we have Tiresias. He's physically blind, but he possesses absolute spiritual foresight. On the other side, we have Oedipus. He has physical vision, he is an elite problem solver, yet he remains totally blind to his own underlying identity. And the devastating climax perfectly resolves this paradox. At the exact moment Oedipus finally acquires true insight into who he really is, he takes the golden brooches from his dead mother's dress and physically blinds himself to the outside world. He simply cannot bear to look upon the light of day, his citizens or his children ever again.
Finally, Section 5. Determinism and Modern Legacy, the 2,500-year footprint.
The footprint of this play over the last 250 years is honestly massive. At the dawn of the 20th century, Sigmund Freud famously leveraged this exact structural myth to codify the Oedipus complex, mapping the systemic dynamics of desire and rivalry in early human development. That permanently cemented Oedipus into the very foundation of Western psychoanalysis. But even beyond psychology, it heavily dictates determinism in modern prestige cinema. Basically, any contemporary narrative that explores premonitions, deterministic loops, or the structural impossibility of editing past actions owes a huge debt to Sophocles. When you watch sci-fi masterworks like The Matrix or Minority Report, where characters are struggling against the rigid code of destiny and prophecy, you are watching the exact same dramatic feedback loops and philosophical audits that were engineered in Athens 2.5 millennia ago. Which leaves us with this final profound question to consider. Oedipus was arguably the smartest man in his world. Yet his intellect only accelerated his downfall. If sheer human intellect in gathering data cannot outmaneuver the cosmic algorithms of fate, who is really writing the code of our lives? It's a structural myth that challenges our deepest assumptions about free will, leaving us to wonder just how much of an illusion our own control really is, no matter how much data we think we have. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to look deeper into the brilliant, inescapable trap of Oedipus Rex.